Welcome back to the deep dive. Ever feel like you work with two completely different types of managers? Like some just make decisions like that and others just like deliberate forever. Well, get ready because today we're going deep on the neuroscience behind all that.
Yeah, we're going to be unpacking a research paper called Cognitive Requirements of Competing Neurobehavioral Decision Systems. Some implications of temporal horizon for managerial behavior in organizations.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I know, right? But trust me, it's got some seriously cool insights. Okay, so this paper, it talks about this idea, the Competing Neurobehavioral Decision Systems Hypothesis.
CMBDS.
Yep, CNBDS for short. And basically it's saying that our brains, we've got these two systems that are just constantly battling it out when we have to make decisions.
Like a tug of war.
Exactly. The impulsive system and the executive system.
Ah, so it's like that angel and devil on your shoulders.
Uh-huh, kind of. So the impulsive system, that's all about like immediate rewards. That I want it now feeling.
Yes, and it lives in the amygdala and ventral striatum, these parts of the brain that just light up when we see like something we want.
So like when you see a big slice of cake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or like a new gadget or something.
Mhm.
And it's all fueled by dopamine,
Mhm.
that neurotransmitter that gives us that good feeling.
The feel-good chemical.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm getting it.
All right, so that's the impulsive side. What about the executive system? That's more like hold on, let's think about this side.
The voice of reason.
Yeah, and it's up there in the prefrontal cortex.
Our brain's planning center.
Yeah, it's the part of the brain that's thinking ahead. What are the consequences of our actions? It's reminding us about our long-term goals.
Makes sense. So how does all of this play out, in an actual workplace?
Okay, so let's say you've got a manager with a tight deadline. That impulsive system, it might be pushing them to just take shortcuts, maybe even, cut some corners just to get it done quickly.
To meet that deadline?
Yeah, which can be good sometimes, but it can also lead to mistakes, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure, if you're not careful.
Because they're not really thinking about the long-term consequences, are they?
Just laser focused on that immediate reward.
Yeah, hitting that deadline. And this paper, it actually links these systems, like the impulsive and executive system, to different types of managerial decisions.
Which makes sense. Like, different decisions need different approaches.
Exactly. And the paper uses this framework, Ansoff's framework. It breaks down decisions into three main categories: administrative, operational, and strategic.
Okay, can you break those down for us?
Sure. So administrative decisions, think of those as like the everyday routine stuff that managers deal with.
Like approving expenses,
Yeah.
scheduling.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. Then you've got operational decisions. Those are a little more complex, more about managing budgets and resources, things like that.
Gotcha.
And then at the top, you've got strategic decisions. Those are the big picture ones, the ones that really shape the future direction of a company.
Like whether to launch a new product or something.
Or expand into a new market. Huge decisions.
So is the paper saying that these different types of decisions, like, use different parts of the brain?
Yeah, that's what it suggests. Like with administrative decisions, they often have a short time frame, right?
Right.
And they don't really impact the long term that much.
Not as much as the big strategic ones.
Right. So the paper's suggesting those might be more influenced by the impulsive system because it's about reacting quickly.
Makes sense.
But then when you get up to those strategic decisions, the ones with the huge long-term impact, well, that executive system really needs to kick in.
You got to be thinking long term.
Yes. Thinking ahead, weighing the pros and cons, you're making sure that decision's really in the best interest of the company's future.
So it's like the bigger the decision, the more your executive system needs to be in control.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. But there's another framework, too, by this guy Herbert Simon. He categorized decisions as either programmed or non-programmed.
Okay, that's new to me.
So programmed decisions, those are the ones that are like following a set procedure. There's a rule for it.
So like if a customer service rep is following a script.
Exactly. They don't even have to think about it much.
Yeah.
But non-programmed decisions, those are the ones where you really need to use your brain because there's no clear-cut solution.
Like when a totally unexpected problem pops up.
Exactly. And again, the paper suggests those programmed decisions, the ones that are more routine, might be more vulnerable to that impulsive system taking over.
But the non-programmed ones, you really need that executive system to step up.
You got it. So does this mean that some managers are just like hardwired to be more impulsive?
Well, it's not quite that simple.
I figure.
Our brains are complex, right? The paper says that individual differences are really important.
It's not all just our brain wiring.
Exactly. And it also depends on the situation.
Right.
The context,
Yeah.
yes. And that's where this theory called reinforcement sensitivity theory comes in. or RST.
Okay, tell me more about this RST.
Well, RST builds on the CMBDS model and says that we have different levels of sensitivity to rewards and punishments.
Hmm.
And it talks about two systems, the behavioral approach system, or BAS, and the behavioral inhibition system, BIS.
Okay, so some people are more drawn to those rewards, and others are more focused on avoiding punishment.
Exactly. So someone with a really strong BAS, they might be more likely to make those impulsive decisions.
Because they want that reward.
Yes, they're motivated by that potential for a quick win.
The thrill of the chase.
Haha, exactly. They love jumping at opportunities and aren't afraid to take risks.
They sound like a lot of fun to work with.
They can be. But then on the other side, you've got someone with a strong BIS.
The more cautious type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're more sensitive to those potential downsides, so they're going to think things through much more carefully before doing anything.
So are we kind of stuck with those tendencies? Like, is it all just predetermined?
Not necessarily. While RST acknowledges those individual differences, it also says that the context, the environment we're in, plays a huge role.
Okay, that's good to hear.
So even if someone's naturally inclined to be impulsive, they can learn to manage that.
They can train their brain.
In a way, yeah. And that's where this idea of pico-economics comes in.
Pico-economics.
It sounds complicated, but it's basically the cognitive layer of this whole neurobehavioral decision-making process.
Okay, break that down for me.
So it's all about how we weigh our motivations, like our desires, against, well, our own self-control over different time frames.
So it's like, do I want this piece of cake now, or do I want to fit into my jeans later?
You got it. It explains why sometimes we make choices that seem irrational.
Like when we know we should do one thing, but we do the other.
Exactly. Like choosing that smaller, immediate reward over something much bigger later on.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
We all are, to some extent. And this is where hyperbolic discounting comes in.
What's that?
It's the idea that the closer a reward is, the more we want it.
So like if that cake is right in front of me.
It's way more tempting than cake you might get next week.
Oh yeah, I feel that.
But the good news is there are strategies we can use to kind of outsmart ourselves and overcome this dysfunctional discounting.
Wait, we can outsmart our own brains? Tell me more.
There are 4 main strategies, and they can really help us make better decisions.
All right, I'm all ears. Let's hear those strategies.
So those strategies are pre-commitment, controlling our attention, managing emotions, and this idea of reward bundling.
Okay, so pre-commitment, is that like making a plan ahead of time?
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
deciding you're only going to have one cookie after dinner.
No matter how tempting they look.
Yep. You make that commitment beforehand so you're less likely to give in later.
I like that. What about controlling attention?
That one's all about shifting your focus away from those temptations.
So if I'm trying to avoid those cookies, maybe I should just like put the cookie jar away.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind.
Or maybe I could call a friend or something to distract myself.
Anything to keep your mind off that immediate temptation.
Okay, that makes sense. What was the next one? Managing emotions.
Right. That's about recognizing those urges and finding ways to calm them down.
So like if I'm craving those cookies, maybe I should take a few deep breaths first.
Exactly. Or go for a walk. Do something to take your mind off of it.
Okay, I can see how that would help. And then reward bundling, right?
Yes. That one's about focusing on those long-term benefits.
So instead of thinking about how good that cookie tastes right now, I should remind myself that resisting it will help me reach my fitness goals.
You got it. By bundling those future rewards together, they become way more appealing.
So it's like the bigger picture.
Precisely.
These are all really great tips. I can definitely see how they could apply to, well, pretty much any decision.
Exactly. It's about finding what works best for you and making it a habit.
So it's not just about willpower, it's about strategy.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, this all ties back to those cognitive styles we talked about earlier, the adapters and innovators.
Oh yeah, I was wondering how all of this fits together.
Well, think about it. If you're a manager and you understand these different brain systems.
You can create a work environment that supports good decision-making.
Exactly. And that's where understanding those adapters and innovators becomes really important.
Because you want a team with both, right?
Exactly. It's like having a well-balanced investment portfolio. You need those safe, reliable bonds and those high-growth stocks.
So adapters are the bonds, the ones who keep things steady.
Yep. They provide stability and consistency. And the innovators, they're like those exciting stocks with the potential for big breakthroughs.
Gotcha. But you need the right mix, right?
Mhm.
Too many of one or the other could throw things off balance.
Exactly. Too many adapters and you might miss out on those game-changing opportunities.
And too many innovators, you might end up with a lot of ideas but no action.
Precisely. So finding that sweet spot, that's the key.
The magic formula.
You could say that. So how do we actually build this dream team, this perfect mix of adapters and
Yeah,
innovators?
how do we do that?
Well, it starts with awareness. Managers need to understand their own cognitive style. Are they an adapter or an innovator?
So they know their own tendencies.
Right, because those tendencies can influence who they hire, who they promote.
So if a manager is a strong adapter, they might unconsciously favor other adapters.
Exactly, which could lead to a team that's, well, a little too stuck in its ways.
Not enough of that innovative spark.
Exactly. So it's really important for managers to be mindful of that and actively seek out people who bring different perspectives.
So they need to look beyond their own reflection, so to speak.
Yeah. And there are tools that can help with this, like the Curtin Adaption Innovation Inventory, the KAI.
What's that?
It's basically an assessment that helps you figure out where you fall in that adapter-innovator spectrum.
It's like a personality test for cognitive styles.
You could think of it that way. It helps you identify your strengths and also those potential blind spots.
So you can build a more well-rounded team.
Exactly. And once you have that team, the next step is creating an environment where everyone feels comfortable being themselves.
Where both adapters and innovators feel valued.
Yes. It's about fostering open communication and encouraging that mutual respect.
And encouraging collaboration across those different styles.
Precisely. And remember, it's not about forcing people into boxes.
Like saying you're an adapter and you're an innovator and never the two shall meet.
Right. It's about recognizing that we all have elements of both styles within us.
We're all a mix.
Exactly. And the ideal approach, it really depends on the situation.
So sometimes you need that careful, measured adaptation.
And sometimes you need that bold, innovative thinking.
It's like having a toolbox, right? You wouldn't use a hammer for every job.
Exactly. You need the right tool for the task at hand.
And by understanding those cognitive styles, managers can build teams that are ready for anything.
Teams that are adaptable, creative, and ready to solve any problem that comes their way.
That's awesome. Yeah. But I'm also curious about how all of this impacts a company's strategy, the big picture.
You're talking about that temporal horizon idea, right?
Yeah. How our brains prioritize the now versus the later.
And how those preferences can really shape our decisions and a company's decisions.
Exactly. It's like that classic marshmallow experiment.
Oh, yeah. Where those kids had to choose between one marshmallow now or two later.
And some kids just couldn't resist, right?
They wanted that immediate gratification.
But others, they had the willpower to wait.
And they got a bigger reward. And it's the same with companies, right?
So a company led by someone with a really strong impulsive system.
They might prioritize those quick wins, those immediate profits.
But neglect those long-term investments.
They're focused on that short-term gain, even if it means sacrificing future growth.
It's like eating that one marshmallow and missing out on the other one.
Exactly. But then on the flip side, you have those leaders who are super focused on the long term.
Maybe a little too focused.
Right. They might get stuck in that planning and analysis phase and miss out on time-sensitive opportunities.
Okay, they're too busy thinking ahead.
Right. So it's like they wait for that second marshmallow, but then something else comes along and distracts them.
And they miss out.
Yeah. So finding that balance is crucial.
It's about having that short-term agility and that long-term vision.
Exactly. A successful company needs both.
It's like playing chess,
Yeah.
right? You need to make those tactical moves to capture pieces right now, but also have a long-term strategy to win the game.
That's a great analogy. And that's why it's so important for leaders to understand their own biases, those temporal biases.
And build teams that provide balance.
Exactly. They need to create a culture that values both the now and the later.
It's about that company-wide mindset.
Exactly. Where everyone's on the same page, working towards both those short-term wins and that long-term vision.
This has been so insightful. We've covered so much, from those brain systems to those cognitive styles, and now how it all plays out in a company's strategy.
And we've only scratched the surface.
I know. It's amazing to think about how our brains can have such a huge impact on our decisions, both individually and as a company.
And remember, this knowledge, it can be really empowering.
Because it helps us understand ourselves and others better.
Exactly. It's not about labeling people, it's about appreciating those differences.
And realizing that those differences, they can actually be a huge strength.
It's all about finding that synergy, that perfect blend.
Like a beautiful symphony.
Exactly. But before we wrap things up, let's bring it back to our listener for a minute.
Let's get practical.
Yeah, because this is all great information, but what can people actually do with it? How can they use it in their own lives?
So how can our listeners actually use all this stuff in their daily lives?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway here is self-awareness.
Knowing yourself.
Exactly. Take some time and really think about your own decision-making style. Do you jump right in or do you like to plan everything out first?
Are you the impulsive type?
Maybe. Or maybe you're more of a careful planner. Once you know your style, you can start to see those potential pitfalls.
Ah, like those traps we might fall into.
Yep. Like if you know you're impulsive, maybe you build in a cooling off period before making any big decisions.
Just to let things settle a bit. Yeah.
Exactly. Or if you know you overthink everything, maybe you set a deadline.
So you don't get stuck in that analysis paralysis.
Precisely.
Love it. So it's all about knowing your strengths and weaknesses and finding ways to, like, work around them.
Exactly.
And those pico-economic strategies, those can be really helpful too, right?
No, absolutely. Like pre-commitment.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
Like if you're trying to save money, you could set up those automatic transfers to your savings account.
So you don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. You're less tempted to spend that money impulsively.
It's like outsmarting your own brain.
In a way, yeah. And don't forget about understanding those cognitive styles in other people.
Knowing whether someone's an adapter or an innovator.
Yeah. If you know your boss is a big adapter, maybe you focus on how your ideas will improve efficiency and structure.
You tailor your approach.
Exactly. Or if you're working with a team of innovators, maybe you brainstorm a little more, encourage those out-of-the-box ideas.
It's all about adapting to the situation.
Exactly. And this goes beyond work, too. This stuff can help you in your personal relationships as well.
Ah, that's interesting.
Like if you know your partner is more of an adapter, maybe you give them a little heads up before you spring any big surprises on them.
That's a good point. I never thought about it that way.
It's really all about communication and empathy, right? Understanding where other people are coming from.
So we can avoid those conflicts and misunderstandings.
Exactly.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. We've gone from those tiny neurons in our brains all the way up to how companies make big decisions.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It really is. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that there's no one right way to make a decision.
It's not about finding that magic formula.
No, it's about understanding ourselves, understanding others, and adapting to the situation.
Being flexible.
Exactly.
And realizing that those differences, they can actually make us stronger, both individually and as a team.
I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
So to all of our listeners out there, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those brains buzzing. The more we understand about how our minds work, the better equipped we'll be to make those tough decisions and build those strong relationships.